Would you love nothing more than to believe that manifesting really works, but you're feeling very skeptical? I get it. I was too. As a doctor, I was trained to be very skeptical of anything that couldn't be explained or measured, anything that just didn't make sense scientifically. When I first heard of manifesting, I thought, well, wouldn't that be nice? But then just dismissed it as a passing trend and a whole bunch of woo-woo nonsense. But then I experienced firsthand the tangible results, and I learned about the science behind manifestation. And there's actually a lot more to it than I had initially thought. In this video, I am going to share my own journey of going from a staunch cynic to actually creating major success for myself using manifestation. We're also going to delve into the psychology and the science behind the hype and explore the practical applications of manifesting in our everyday lives. I'm going to address some common doubts, and I'm also going to share my personal experiences with you and my stories of exactly what happened when I started to harness the power of manifesting. And I'm also going to show you how you can do the same. Welcome back to the channel. If you have watched me here before, and if you are new, then I'm Dr. Kim Foster, and I'm an MD turned coach and wellness expert. So let's dive in. So I first encountered the concept of manifesting several years ago when I was on a journey to find my way through burnout and dissatisfaction in my medical career and in my life in general. I was going for a lot of long walks and listening to a ton of podcasts about personal growth and personal development, and I kept hearing people talking about manifesting and the law of attraction, and at first I had no idea what they were talking about. Then when I looked into it and learned that it was about the idea of calling your desires in just by thinking about them, I thought, yeah, okay, whatever. I had a very scientific education, obviously studying biology as an undergrad and then med school, and my whole professional life was all about evidence and hard facts, and it had been for years. But the further that I went into the personal development world, the more I kept hearing about manifesting. It just wouldn't leave me alone. So I decided to just look into it a bit and see what all the fuss was about. So I got a few books on the topic. One of the first books that I read was Lucky Bitch by Denise Duffield Thomas, because I heard Denise being interviewed on a podcast, and I actually really liked her manner, and some of what she said sounded pretty interesting, and I thought that was as good a place to start as any. And I really enjoyed that book. And then I gave myself permission to just park my skepticism and just go with it for the time being, at least until I'd learned more and understood it better. So I kept going and kept seeking out more information through books and podcasts and basically doing my own research. And so I began to understand that manifesting is much more than just wishful thinking and magic, just wishing upon a star and things just drop into your lap. There's a lot more to it. Bringing our desires into reality requires aligning our thoughts and beliefs and actions. And for me, it was that action piece that was really the key, but I'll get into that in a sec. I started to get really curious where all this manifesting stuff had come from anyway, and I discovered that manifesting concepts have their roots in ancient spiritual teachings and philosophical traditions, but they gained widespread attention in modern times through a few key influencers and some popular books. The Secret, for instance, played a significant role in introducing manifesting to mainstream culture when it came out in 2006. But just because something is trending or becoming really popular does not mean it's accurate, right? Doesn't mean it works. But the more that I read about manifesting, the more I encountered the psychological and even scientific basis for it. And that drew me even deeper for sure. And that's what I want to get into next. So what I have learned and what I now know to be true is that manifesting operates on some key psychological and neurological principles. So the first principle to understand is the reticular activating system. Every day, all day, we are exposed to just a ton of information, a ton of stimuli, and just a whole bunch of incoming data. If we actually tried to pay attention to all of that, we would go insane. It's just too much. It would be like drinking from a fire hose. So our brains have a very sophisticated way of filtering out what's important and what's not, and it's called the reticular activating system, or RAS. It acts as a filter by prioritizing the stimuli that other parts of our brain have said, this sort of stuff is important. Pay attention to these things. So have you ever been in a crowded room where multiple conversations are happening simultaneously, yet you're able to focus on one conversation while tuning out the rest? That's your RAS at work. It filters out irrelevant stimuli and highlights the information that is relevant to your current goals or interests. Or say at the same party, amid all the chatter, you suddenly hear your name mentioned in a conversation, just like a couple of people away. Despite the background noise, your RAS has alerted you to the sound of your name. Or have you ever noticed that once you learn a new word, you suddenly notice it everywhere? You see it in a book, as you're scrolling in social media, it pops up in TV shows and movies and music. This happens because your reticular activating system is now primed to notice this word. I'll tell you when this concept totally clicked for me. When I was learning about manifesting, my boys were really young and I spent a lot of time on the carpet playing Lego with them. They're both nuts about Lego. And one day I had just come back from a walk and I'd been listening to a podcast about manifesting, and then I sat down to play Lego with my son, and we had a huge bin of random Lego bricks. And so as I was sitting there, my son said, "Mommy, I need some red pieces." And so I started digging through the bin looking for red pieces, and after a few seconds I realized that all I could see was the red pieces. All the other colors just kind of faded into the background. But then after finding a handful of red pieces for him, he said, "Okay, now I need a white piece." And so I shifted my focus and started digging again, and like magic, all the white pieces became so clear and obvious, and I stopped seeing the red pieces. They just kind of blended into the background with all of the other colors. And I sat there and realized, oh my God, this is how it works. This is, in a very real sense, manifesting. It's not that the red pieces were magically appearing in the Lego bin or that the white pieces were then magically appearing after that. They were all there right from the beginning, but I wasn't looking for the white pieces initially, so I didn't see them and I didn't pluck them out. But once I shifted my focus, there they were. When you set a specific goal or intention, your reticular activating system becomes primed to notice opportunities and resources that align with that goal. For example, if you're searching for a new job, you may suddenly start noticing job postings or networking opportunities that you'd previously totally overlooked when you weren't focused on that goal. It's not that they magically appeared. They were there. You just weren't primed to notice them. Now, the second psychological principle to understand is that what you believe influences your everyday actions. So let me share a concrete illustration just so that you understand how this plays out in the real world. Let's consider two friends, Anna and Ben, who both aspire to become successful writers. Anna is plagued by negativity, and she fears that she's not a good enough writer, and she doubts the value of networking and workshops. She's convinced that she won't succeed, so she procrastinates and kind of passively waits for an unlikely big break. In contrast, Ben embraces a positive mindset, and he believes that he's actually on the path to success. He visualizes his achievements, he writes consistently, he improves his skills through workshops and networks diligently, and he sees each rejection as a step closer to his goal. So the difference in their outcomes is really clear. Anna's negative outlook is going to prevent her from taking actions that could lead to success, which turns her fears into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Meanwhile, Ben's proactive and positive approach is going to keep him wide open to opportunities and will drive him to actively pursue his dream. So between the two, Ben is clearly poised to become a published author. Okay, the next psychological principle at play in manifesting is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity refers to our brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections in response to experience and learning. It was commonly believed until the latter half of the 20th century that the adult human brain was a static organ with neurons that were just fixed both in function and number after a certain developmental stage, which was typically believed to be childhood or adolescence. This view held that once brain development was complete, the number of neurons was set, and any damaged or lost neurons could not be replaced, and the brain just didn't have any ability to change its function or its structure. The concept of neuroplasticity began to gain significant attention and acceptance among neuroscientists in the late 20th century. Pioneering research in the 1960s demonstrated that the brain definitely changes throughout life. These studies showed that a whole variety of factors could lead to structural changes in the brain, including the growth of brand new neural connections. So the idea that you cannot teach an old dog new tricks is completely false. The brain is very capable of reorganizing itself by forming new neural connections. So how does this relate to manifesting? Well, for one thing, because of neuroplasticity, we know that repetitive thoughts and beliefs can physically alter the brain's structure. When you practice manifestation, you're focusing on positive outcomes and cultivating specific beliefs and attitudes. And this strengthens the neural pathways that are associated with those positive thoughts and outcomes. Neuroplasticity also shows that what we pay attention to can reshape our brain. In the context of manifesting, if you believe that what you desire is already yours, you're much more likely to notice opportunities and take actions that are going to align with your goals, as we talked about when I was just talking about the reticular activating system. So this also comes into play when we're talking about habits and actions. Manifesting involves not just positive thinking, but also taking aligned actions. By regularly engaging in behaviors that move you toward your goal, you rewire and reinforce the neural pathways that are needed to support these actions, which is going to make them more of a natural part of your life. Okay, the final scientific principle that I want to touch on is quantum physics. And this one is more of a brain bender for sure, and might be the hardest aspect of manifesting to kind of get your head around, and is in truth a lot more speculative than other principles. One of the concepts here is the idea of energy, that everything is energy, including our emotions and our thoughts. And so our energy, and specifically our frequencies, can actually influence what happens in our reality. The idea is that our thoughts and intentions can influence the quantum field. Now, as I said, this is a lot more speculative than the other scientific elements of manifestation, but that doesn't mean that there is no truth to it, because there's definitely a connection to be drawn through the core principles of quantum physics. I'm not going to go into any more detail on this here. If you are interested in this, though, then let me know in the comments, and maybe I will make a separate video on just this aspect of things, because it is truly fascinating. But for now, I want to move on just to talk about how manifesting has actually shown up in my own life. And this is what really turned me into a believer. So as I was learning more about manifesting and thinking a lot about it, I started to reflect back on the path that my life had taken thus far, and began to realize that I had actually manifested a lot of things in my life without realizing it. And that's because manifesting works whether you are consciously trying to use it or not. Because ultimately we get what we focus on, what we expect, what we plan for, and what we believe is possible for us. And the more that I realized this, the more shocking it was to realize just how true this had been for me. One of the most interesting examples of this was when my husband and I owned a secondhand bookstore. This was when we first moved to Vancouver back in 2003, before we had kids. And this is a whole other story and was a really super fun chapter of life. But basically, we've always been big time book lovers and just love poking around secondhand bookstores. And we just decided to open a bookstore and give it a go. But the interesting thing is that even on our slowest months, we always sold just enough books to cover our commercial rent for the store space. When we started up the store, we said, okay, all we really need to do is just generate enough revenue to cover rent. Then we'll figure out the rest. It was uncanny how often this happened, month after month, just enough, but no more. We joked about how weird it was. We wondered how our commercial landlord could have possibly known when he set the rent. But it wasn't until well afterwards that I realized we had been manifesting that number. We were aligning all of our energy to meeting our rent number, all our tallies and efforts and calculations. I'm sure that the way that we priced the books, because that was of course up to us, and how we displayed the books and how we interacted with customers, all of it was basically scripting the rent amount into existence, into our reality. All those micro decisions every day, all those little actions that we took, everything was aligned with that number. And almost like magic, that's what we ended up with every month. We couldn't really, figure out why we were stuck at that number. In the end, we just kind of assumed that that was the cap for that particular business model. But was it? As I read about manifesting years later, I was like, oh my God, we had been manifesting that revenue amount every month. So here's another example. I know now that I manifested getting into medical school. From the moment that I decided at the age of 17 that that's what I wanted, everything was aligned with that goal. Everything I did, all the things that happened were totally in alignment. And it was just a matter of time. I expected it would happen, and so it did. When people ask a kid or a high school student the question, what are you going to be when you grow up? Or what are you going to study when you go to college? Well, when I first decided to aim for medical school, and I can't really explain this, but I always responded in the same way. I'm going to be a doctor. Not I want to be a doctor or I want to go to medical school, but that I am going to be a doctor, like it was a certainty. I honestly wish I could remember what inspired me to say it this way exactly, but that's what I did. It sticks in my mind because I do remember the reactions from people when I said this. They were always a bit taken aback because it's just simply not how people tend to answer that question. So they were kind of surprised and then they were like, oh, good for you. I love the certainty. As I learned about manifesting, I started to understand that somehow I intuitively knew how to manifest things. I just didn't realize it. And that's another powerful lesson about manifesting is that it actually works whether you believe in it or not. Because let's say that I had answered that question differently. Let's say that I had said, I hope I can go to medical school, but I know it's really competitive, so I guess we'll just see. Because those words would have reflected a lot of inner conflict and self-doubt that I didn't really believe it was possible for me. And if you don't really believe something is possible, then are you really going to take the action that's necessary every day, every week, every month that is going to move you toward that goal? Knowing that I was destined for medical school meant that I spotted a tiny little sign stuck up in our dorm about a pre-med club that would give hopeful med school applicants some insider tips on how to get into medical school. Believing that it was possible for me meant that I put in the work to get the grades that I needed and then signed up for the MCAT and studied for that test really hard. If I didn't really believe it was possible, would I have actually put myself through all of that discomfort, the expense, the hassle of prepping for and taking the MCAT? Probably not. In fact, it wouldn't really make any sense, right? Why would I do something if I didn't actually believe that it could happen? So this is how manifesting plays out. It starts with your very clear intention and then your conviction that that thing is yours. And then every step you take is aligned with that conviction. You stay primed for opportunities because your reticular activating system is ready to notice them, and then you follow through because you believe that it is going to happen. With the bookstore, all of our energy was on just meeting our rent. That was our intention. So I know for sure that if we had had a different intention, we would have had our radar up for all kinds of other opportunities or ways to generate more revenue. We would have looked into other solutions and gone into problem-solving mode if we had set our sights on earning double our rent, for example. Okay, so as I reflected back on all of these experiences from earlier in my life and began to truly believe in this, I started talking a little bit more openly to people about this, and unsurprisingly, I encountered a lot of skeptics. I tried talking to some friends and family about some of my thoughts and the things that I was learning, and for the most part, most people I talked to basically laughed. The very few colleagues that I tried mentioning it to basically just dismissed it outright, just like I had earlier in my journey, to be honest, so I didn't really blame them. My husband looked at me like he was worried that I was losing my mind. But then I found other people who weren't so skeptical, and this really started to feel like my tribe. I had begun going to some coaching and personal development events, both virtual and in real life, and these places were amazingly full of people who completely believed in the principles and had very open minds and were all for it. So I decided to put it to the test in real time. I wanted to see if I could consciously harness the power of manifestation in my life. So I got to work. I got really serious about journaling and doing a lot of inner work to get super clear on my vision and clear any blocks that would be standing in my way. And in the end, I manifested a completely different life for myself. I started off as a very burned out, overwhelmed, stressed, and quite frankly, unwell doctor, trapped in my profession. And now I am the CEO and founder of my own company with all the freedom in the world because we now live part of the year in London, England, which is just an absolute dream come true for me. And I love my everyday. I love Mondays. I'm healthier and happier than I have ever been. My husband started as an even bigger skeptic than me, I think. And even though I'm not sure he is actually all in on the idea, he is definitely willing to admit that he just doesn't know everything that there is to know about this. And I've definitely made him a believer with my results. So he certainly isn't about to talk me out of what has been working out so far. When I was first building my side hustle as a coach and I was starting to make little, dribs and drabs of revenue, we had some serious conversations about how things were going and what this was actually going to mean for our family as I needed to scale back on my work as a doctor. And I remember one day we were sitting on the couch with a bottle of wine after the kids were in bed, and he said, just tell me, where do you think this is all going? Like, what do you actually think that you can achieve with all of this? And I said, this is going to not only replace my income as a doctor, but far exceed it. And he said, is that just what you are hoping for? Like, how certain are you that you can actually get there? And I looked him straight in the eyes and said, completely certain. I am 100% positive that this is going to happen. And I totally meant it. I completely believed it. It took me a few years to get there, but I got there. It has taken a lot of focus and a lot of hard work to get where I am. And to be honest, I am not done yet, but I know that my intention and my commitment to manifesting my dreams has played a huge role in just completely changing my life. I know that manifesting works because when you have a very clear desire and you align your whole energy with that intention, then you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And you take action that you would otherwise hesitate to make, or maybe wouldn't even consider. And I also do believe that the universe responds to your shift in energy. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I think that you are going to love the video that I'm going to link next. It goes into more detail about everything that led up to me ultimately quitting medicine. And I would love to hear from you. Did this resonate with you? Is manifesting something that you believe in, or at least willing to learn a little bit more about? And if so, what do you want to learn next? Let me know your questions in the comments. Okay, that is a wrap for this video. Take care, have a wonderful day, and I will see you again very soon. All right, the next psychological principle. All right, the next psych. Okay, take a sec to fix the hair. Okay, oh, my foot is falling asleep. Gotta shift. Okay, okay, totally numb. All right.